All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. If you're listening to this in the car, we've got on the wise and wonderful Mr. Garry Ridge, former CEO at WD-40 and author of the new book, Any Dumbass Can Do It. Did I get that right, Garry?
You did. But let me tell you one thing, Kevin. Us in this circumstance is not reflective of anyone's posterior or bottom. It's really about a donkey. And you know what's great about a donkey? They can carry a lot of weight, they can go a lot of distance, they're very stubborn, and they get things done. So any dumbass can do it as a donkey can do it.
I love that. I've never been compared to a dumbass, but I've been called an asshole a couple times.
You're not that at all.
Well, cool, Gary. Well, you should tell my uncle that. Well, this is an interesting time to reconvene with you, my friend, because lots has changed since our last interview. You are now out of WD-40, and you've taken some time to write a book that, as you mentioned earlier, is more about legacy and kind of the impact you want to have now on leaders around the world. So great opportunity to come on to the Real Leaders Podcast, educate this audience. And I really want to start with the moment you talk about maybe what triggered this concept of happiness and where you kind of got this purpose as a leader. You start the book out in an airplane, is that right?
Yeah, I do. I was on a Qantas 747 flying from Los Angeles to Sydney. Been a CEO for about a year and a half. I knew with the knowledge we had in the company how we could take the brand to many countries around the world. That was our goal, take the blue and yellow can with little red top to the world. But what kept swelling in my head was how do you create an organization that the sun is never going to set on it? So how do you empower people and engage them so that you've got an organization that's passionate about executing what you wanted to do? I didn't know how to do it. So as you do when you're traveling, I had some stuff, and I guess I was at 38,000 feet, 2 a.m. in the morning, somewhere over the South Pacific Ocean between Los Angeles and Sydney. And I read a quote, and it's attributed to the Dalai Lama. And it said, "Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If you can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them." And I thought, you know what, that makes sense. And then I read another quote, funnily enough, from Aristotle, who said, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." And I thought, well, duh. Absolutely. If people really enjoy what they're doing, they're going to do it to a higher quality. And this was kind of swimming around in my head. And I got back to San Diego and I was reading an article in the local paper, the Union Tribune, and it talked about a master's degree at the University of San Diego. And there was an information session, and Ken Blanchard, the guru of servant leadership, was speaking at this information session. And I went to it and I learned that this program at USD was architected by Ken and the then dean at the school. And Ken he said, most MBA programs get people in the head. We actually have to start getting people in the heart because it's the heart of the organization that really, really can drive, engagement and performance and servant leadership. And I went, you know what? Must be what I'm destined to do. So I'm already the CEO of a US public company. I enroll and I go back to school. And for the next 2 years, I studied alongside Ken and other, great professors. And I really was around understanding the power of servant leadership. And then we put it to work. And I loved that program and I loved that message so much that I actually at WD-40 company put 30 people over the next 20 years fully paid through that master's degree program to really make sure that we embedded the power of servant leadership in the company, and the rest is history. We had we had a culture that was extraordinary. 98% of the people said they loved to work at the company. 93% employee engagement. 97% of people said they respected their coach, who was their boss, and most people leave their organizations because they hate their boss.
Hmm.
Oh, and by the way, the company did okay. We had a compounded annual growth rate, a total shareholder return of 15% a year. We took the market cap from 300 million to 3.6 billion over that period of time. And it was all because not only did we have a great strategy, but we had a very highly engaged tribe that was passionate about executing against what we wanted to execute against.
And maybe a great segue into chapter two, right? We're talking about how you can really think about the tribal culture of your organization and how it could be a unifier for you. What do you mean by tribal culture?
Well, if you think about one of the biggest desires we have as human beings, we have this need to belong. If you go back to Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, Kevin, the first two rungs of that actualization diagram are, can I survive and am I secure? And the third one is love and belonging. And in an organization, if you want to have a highly engaged workforce, number one, you have to show people that they belong. You have to show people that the work they do matters to them and to the organization. You have to create an atmosphere, a company where there's a high degree of psychological safety. So instead of fear and failure, we have learning that's driving us. You have to make sure that people understand that you're a coach. You're there to help them step into the best version of their personal self. And all of that is underpinned by a foundation of hierarchical values that protect people and set them free. So this is simple, not easy, and time is not your friend, which is a lot of what we talk about in the book. But you've had in the background there. I see a poster of my friend Simon Sinek, and in his book Leaders Eat Last, he had an algorithm. He said culture equals values plus behavior, and I said to Simon, you missed a word. Culture equals values plus behavior times consistency, because there's no good you coming up with a set of values and sticking them up on somebody's wall and pointing to them if leadership is not consistently acting within the parameters of those values.
Well, Gary, thanks you so much for just unpacking, all these great leadership, I guess, philosophies, if you will, experiences. I think in this podcast, though, I really just want to simplify it for this person listening in the car going to work, right? Like could you maybe break it down? We threw in a lot of different things there, and I want to just spend the rest of this episode really unpacking it in a simple way so that someone can take action on this matter. Let's just break it down. Let's just start with what you started with in WD-40 to maybe help not necessarily amplify but empower more leaders. Just simplify it for us.
Okay. The first thing is you need to have a people first mindset. As a leader, you need to truly believe that it's all about the people in the organization. Number two is you need to be brave around accountability and behavior. So are you exercising brave activities around accountability and behavior? You have to have a clearly defined, authentic purpose. So let's think about the purpose at WD-40 Company. If I was to ask you, what do you think our purpose is? You might rightly say to stop squeaks. Well,
Right.
your product, and it's in the book, there's a chapter about this, your product is not your purpose. Our purpose was we existed to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. So if you asked people in the company what we did, we're in the memories business. You have to have transparency. You have to get rid of fear, so have learning moments, not failure. And again, you have to have belonging, acceptance, and connectedness. And all this sits on a platform of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. So that's the magic. When I was a young lad back in Australia going to high school, my science teacher, Kevin, gave me a petri dish. And the science teacher said, we are going to grow culture in the petri dish. And they said there are two things that are important. Number one, what are the ingredients? And I've just shared with you and the guys on the freeway or girls on the freeway some of the ingredients. But now you, as the owner of the petri dish, have to do two things. You have to feed the good ingredients so they continue to flourish, and you have to be brave enough to attack the toxins so they don't kill the good ingredients and kill the culture. And
Mm,
unfortunately, a lot of people in organizations don't treat the toxins. You know, Joe's out there, he's the top salesman, and he's bringing in the best revenue ever, but he's an a-hole. So everybody else in the organization says, well, you know what, I can be an a-hole here as long as I'm a performer, and then you get toxins in the culture.
mm, mm. Yeah, really, really interesting. So if I'm maybe not the coach, right? If I'm someone in the organization who wants to do good and wants to achieve, how, like, can I be a leader in the organization? Like, can I like how can I be a leader one day in the organization?
Well, everybody's a leader. You're a leader at home, you're a leader at work, you're a leader everywhere. But, you know, if you think about, a great servant leader, what is it about? A great servant leader loves and involves their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent, so you're continually in that learning place. You're connected with a high degree of emotional intelligence, so you care about people. You have a heart of gold, but you also have a backbone of steel. You're a champion of hope. You know micromanagement is not scalable. You do what you say you're going to do, and you treasure the gift of feedback. And that's one of the great things I learned from my friend Marshall Goldsmith. You know, Marshall is one of the, if not the top CEO coach in the world. And Marshall's all about believing feedback, because whatever people tell you about you, it's true. It's not what you believe about yourself.
Hmm. Interesting. There was this great quote from I think it was Jay Shetty who also stole from somebody else. It says like, I am not who I think I am. I am what you think that I think I am. And I thought that that was a really powerful quote as well. Okay, well we've got again a lot here that we're trying to unpack. You know, you mentioned just the basic needs. Now for leaders and CEOs listening to this right now, making sure that we're establishing some psychological safety in the organization is something that you have achieved there at WD-40. But consistency is the number one thing. As you're talking to Simon Sinek about, what did you have to consistently think about in order to maintain this culture of psychological safetiness?
Well, you have to consistently execute the foundations that are providing the safety. So, number one, our values at WD-40 Company, they weren't just up on a wall. We had a process at the company, and it came from the first book I wrote with Ken Blanchard called Helping People Win at Work. And it was, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So part of that was we used to have at least minimum every 90 days a one-on-one conversation with those we had the privilege to lead. Part of that conversation talked about our values. So we would ask our tribe members to share with us, how did they live our values in the last 90 days? So, for example, our number one value was we value doing the right thing. Tell us how you lived that in the last 90 days. Our number two value was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Tell us, how did you create positive? And it went on. There were six values.
Right.
So what we were doing was embedding the values into behavior and having people give us real examples of how that actually happened in the organization. So that's the consistency. You know, I don't think there was a decision ever made in the company where if we were sitting around the table, we wouldn't say, okay, let's think about that and let's reflect and put it through our values to see where it sits. So it became that foundation of decision making that's so important.
I think the term goes, your values create value in the organization. Were you able to, I guess, correlate all this leadership development investment into sales, or is it kind of like the glue guy in basketball where he does all the work and doesn't really show up in the stat sheet?
Oh no, it you mean in results?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we 7x revenue. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool over a period of time. We took the brand to 176 countries around the world. And as I shared with you, we took the market cap from 300 million to 3.6 billion. So yeah, you know, and here's what I think is really interesting. Leaders and people in organizations spend a lot of time, talent, and treasure developing their strategic plan. Yeah, Kevin, you and I could sit down and we'll write a really good strategic plan. You know, who's our end user, who's the target, and how are we going to go to market, how are we going to promote, blah blah. Take that strategic plan across, to some smart professor, and they'll mark it up. Congratulations, Kevin and Gary, 70 out of 100 on your strategic plan. You've nailed it. That's fine. But if only 30% of your people in your organization go to work every day and are passionately executing against that strategic plan, 30 times 70 is a number. If
Mm.
80% of your people go to work every day and are enthusiastic executing against that plan, 80 times 70 is a much bigger number. So I think this is where leaders miss it. It's not about just your strategy, it's what we call the will of the people times strategy equals the outcome. Will of the people. So my challenge to those with us today is how are you investing in creating a high will of the people in your organization? It's simple, not easy, and time is not your friend, but the foundations are there. Belonging, matter, security, safety, values, coaching.
I love the framework here, starting with your values, getting a clear purpose, helping the organization really see a vision within your ultimate vision, and something that I think a lot of leaders do a really good job of. Um, I guess, for me, what I'm thinking about now is, does it depend on the person you bring into the organization? Do they have to be self-motivated in order to do something like this? What has your experience been in finding the right people to bring onto the team?
Well, if you were to go onto our careers page, the first thing that just screams at you is these are the values we have in our organization, and we describe them. And we basically say, if you can't get comfortable living in an organization with these values, don't call us. I can teach people to do better Excel spreadsheets, but it really comes back to the fact that, unless people are comfortable with being held accountable, creating memories, doing the right thing, you know, having learning moments and improving on a daily basis, they're not going to feel good in the organization. So, we were deliberate. We spent a lot of our energy when we were bringing people on board, really talking about do you think you'll feel comfortable here? And sometimes people got in under the net, and funnily enough, end up getting voted off the island by the other tribe members because they didn't fit. And I want to
Mm.
go back to that thing about happiness too.
Yeah.
When I've spoken to people about happiness, they say, "Well, what do you mean? What does happiness mean?" Happiness isn't joy, joy, joy. Happiness is fulfillment. And the
Mm.
way we make people happy in the organizations is to let them have a full life around belonging, around learning in an organization. I was talking to someone earlier today about AI, and it's a big question, a big subject on everybody's table right now. And I said, you know, AI is about the head. AI will never take away our heart. And I think in organizations, people are getting afraid that AI is going to take away jobs and do certain things. One of the biggest pieces of negative feedback I got when I was at WD-40 is we don't have enough time. And if I was leading a company right now, I'd say to the people who know AI, tell me all of the mundane tasks this can take away to free my people to do the exciting stuff, to use the heart and the head together, because AI cannot use the heart and the head together.
Mm. Yeah, and really powerful. I mean, that is what I think a lot of smart leaders are doing right now. They are asking their employees, "Hey, what can AI solve for you right now? Like, what are the mundane tasks? List them all out, and we will help train you on how to do these."
Yeah.
Which is a very exciting time to live in. What's been your experience now with this AI revolution? I mean, you've been out WD-40 for 2 years now. Is that right?
Coming
Almost a
up
year.
to, yeah, coming
Coming
up
up
to
2 years.
three next January. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's
Well,
been yeah, your experience so far with AI? What have you been hearing from other CEOs?
Well, I sit on the board of Gorilla Glue, a company based in Cincinnati. If it's stuck, use WD-40. If it's not stuck, use Gorilla Glue. And it's been great. That's a great company with great culture. But, just watching the way they're bringing AI into the business to do what we just spoke about. I'm also on their board of another company in San Diego called Eastridge Workforce Solutions, who are in the talent acquisition business. And actually, I was at a board meeting there just yesterday, and talking about how AI in that situation is also helping to streamline the database of candidates and to be able to match more appropriate candidates to the jobs that are out there. So I think that's great. And I'm surprised. I'm the dean of dumbassery, right? But I use AI all the time now. I in my coaching business, I coach 8 CEOs right now, and I gather information from their stakeholders, and I've been using AI to help me analyze that feedback to, if you will, sanitize it so I can then feed it out to the people I coach. So I think it's really exciting. I even used AI today to write a letter to American Airlines because they're not respecting my loyalty.
That's funny. Yeah, there's a little of that nowadays, I feel like, especially with airlines. You raise a really good topic and really good point. It's just about, is there any heart left, in these organizations that are growing, especially with chat GBITA, right? It's coming for your EBITDA. It's something that is really cost efficient, right? We are Google, I think, said laid off 35% of its managers. We've got software engineers being laid off. Lots of people are having to relearn this new technology in order to get these jobs. What do you think is happening, and what maybe message would you have for many of the CEOs who are just in the head and looking at just the numbers?
Well, again, I'd go back to my original statement is, are you maximizing the output of your organization by not only having a great strategy, but by investing in the will of the people? And I think that's really the real essence of the whole thing. I think it's really sad. I was always, challenged at WD-40 that, hey, we don't have enough people. And I'm very proud of the fact that during my 25 years as CEO, we never laid anyone off ever through any downturn. Now, that doesn't mean people didn't leave the company, or we didn't share people with a competitor if they weren't, someone who should be with the organization. But when we went through the Great Recession, COVID, the Asian meltdown or whatever, we never laid anyone off. And the reason we were able to do that is we didn't get out over our skis. I used to challenge our people all the time, remember that when we bring someone into the organization, we're making a commitment to them and their family. So let's not, get too far out over our skis. And there were times when, we were doing really well, and, I people would go, well, let's just ramp up. I said, well, wait a minute. We can ramp up, but do we really need to ramp up? And are we just, what happens when we have to ramp down? So I think those were the important things that we needed to think about in the organization. Don't get out over your skis. Make tough decisions when you need to, but let people know you're doing it because you're protecting them and their life.
That's really wise, really important. Like, just a question that just popped in my head is like, of your 40 years of experience there at WD-40, like, what were some of the most difficult challenges that you ran into?
Oh, well, where do you want to start? We were a petroleum-based product. Oil went from $25 a barrel to $150 a barrel. We had the Asian meltdown, that where the Great Recession. There were many times when, we had to really make sure that we were making decisions based on our values. And yeah, and every day you're a public company, the lights never go off you. one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I learned it from Marshall Goldsmith. He said as you become, a leader and you move up the leadership ladder, remember that your suggestions become orders. And that's something to really remember that, are you being clear, and is there clarity around, what message you're sending to people in the organization? And that's what's really important.
It's your suggestions become orders.
Orders. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. You know, I forgot WD-40 was a publicly traded organization. Tell me about, did you also experience that struggle, as you alluded to earlier, of trying to ramp up growth to, maximize shareholder value? Did you deal with those kind of pressures, and how does a CEO navigate those?
Well, as a public company, I think one of my big learning moments was pick your shareholders.
Mm.
And I spent, well, I did 100 investor earnings calls over my 25 years. Those are the public ones, and I don't know how many one-on-one investor meetings I had in New York, Chicago, or wherever else. And I would say to our investors, don't follow us quarter to quarter. We're not a quarter to quarter organization. And in fact, I remember one meeting very vividly where one of our largest shareholders, I said to them, I'm not smart enough to run or to lead a company in 90-day intervals. And this person said, I'm so glad you're not dumb enough to try. And so we never gave quarterly guidance. We gave annual guidance, and actually Simon Sinek quotes me. I was on a conference call once, and we released our earnings, and what one of the analysts questioned me and said, "Well, you missed your number." And I said, it wasn't my number, it was your number. You don't know what my number was, but you're wanting to, follow us on a quarter to quarter basis, and don't do that. We're going to build an enduring company over time, which we did.
Mm.
And, as I said, it was not insignificant that we took the market cap from 300 million to 3.6 billion dollars. That over a 25-year period, not a bad investment.
Not a bad investment at all. I mean, so I guess the way I imagine most publicly traded organizations and privately held companies is, you do have your vision statement, you've got your missions, you've got your values, and then when it comes to operations, you've got your annual, quarterly, monthly goals, your budgets, and your numbers, your KPIs that people need to hit. So am I understanding this correctly? You still had all those goals, but maybe you just thought about them in a different way. Tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. I used to give annual guidance and a 5-year projection to the
Okay.
street. So here's what we think we're going to do this year. And here's where we want to get to 5 years from now. And here's how we plan to get there. So
Mm.
that's now internally, of course, we had metrics. We said we had a metric around gross margin. We had a metric around operating expenses, or what I used to call the cost of doing business. We had a goal of a percentage of EBITDA that we wanted to manage. So that gave our people in the organization their playground. You
Mm.
need this gross margin. Here's how much you can invest on an annual basis, and this is what we want at the bottom line. And then, of course, we had a wonderful incentive system. It was called the Growth Reward Plan. I took the word bonus out of the vocabulary. I said, we don't pay bonuses.
Mm.
We pay people for growth. And, you could earn, significant amount over your base compensation as we grew. And that meant the shareholders were happy, they were growing, our people were happy, they were being rewarded. So, all those metrics were in place. It
Mm.
just, I wasn't focused on life or death in a 90-day period. No way.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. There's this other thought leader, maybe you've heard of him, his name Milton Friedman, who talks a lot about, the purpose of a business is to maximize shareholder value. Now, under the lens of servant leadership, was there one stakeholder that you tried to serve above all others,
Our
employees,
people,
customers,
our people.
people?
If we take There's another saying, if you take care of, and I think Ken Blanchard said this, if you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers and they will take care of your shareholders.
Mm, hmm.
Again, it's a balance. You can't just be people focused and not results focused. You can't be just result focused and not people focused. It's a balance. Leadership is a balance between being tough minded and tender hearted, and the genius is in the middle, in the end.
Mm.
So you've got to look at both.
Did you look at both on a spreadsheet? I mean, were there things that you were looking at from an employee perspective as well as obviously from a growth perspective too? I mean, how just out of curiosity, like how were your priorities and how did you lead, at WD-40?
Well, we used to, yeah, absolutely. Soon after I was given the privilege to lead WD-40 Company, I said, I have to get a pulse on our people. I have to know how they feel. So before it was even common, started doing employee feedback loops. And that's how we got the numbers to measure the engagement of our people. So we would do at least once a year employee opinion surveys. We used to get a 98% participation rate in the survey. And just some of them, the number one in 2024, the number one rated question at 98.8% was, I love to tell people I work at WD-40 Company. The number two at 98.2 was, I understand how my job contributes to achieving WD-40's goals. 98%. That means we are showing people that they matter. Remember I talked about mattering? I know
Mm.
what results are expected of me. 97.7% of our people knew what results are expected from me. Now, this one will blow you away. I respect my coach. Now, let's put that in perspective. The coach is what other organizations would call their manager. And most people leave organizations because they don't like their manager. 97.7% of the members of the WD-40 tribe globally said, I respect my coach.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
stunning. And when we asked them why, they said, because the coach is here to help me win. And then I feel my opinions and values are a good fit with the WD-40 culture. 97.7% of people said they feel that their opinion and values are a good fit. So
Mm.
these are the way we measured against those pillars that I talked about of belonging, mattering, coaching, etc.
Right. Well, thanks for answering that question. And, you alluded to a lot of good points earlier. Let's go back to happiness again. In the book, you define it as, which I love, authentic connection. Like, I love that. Like, thinking about building authentic connection within your organization is such an admirable goal. What were you telling your coaches throughout, or these managers, throughout your career? I mean, how did you help them build authentic connection, and how did you build it with your coaches?
Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's taking the time to ask some simple questions. Are you okay? I mean, the first chapter of my book is, Are you okay? Are you okay? What's on your mind? I'll give you an interesting example of this. Our second value at the company, and again, these values are connected, and this will connect you to the authentic connection. Our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Here's a nearly true, probably right story. We just changed the names to protect the innocent. It's a morning at WD-40 Company. I'm holding a meeting with some of our senior leaders. There's a person in the room that is not creating positive, lasting memories, which is very out of character for this person. I've seen them do it before. They're sort of sucking the energy out of the room. You've been in one of those meetings, I know, Kevin. So what do you do as the leader? Well, number one, you could stop the meeting and say, Kevin, that behavior is unacceptable. Please stop it in our meeting. Well, what does that do? Everybody else in the room says, when am I going to be, publicly executed? That's not going to do anything. Number two, you do nothing, which means that the values that you say are important to the company are just words on a wall. So what happened? The meeting finished. So I said to Kevin, Kevin, let's take a walk outside. So we walked
I
outside the
remember
building.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, we walked outside the building, and I started by looking in a trash can and behind a tree and under a car. And Kevin says, what the hell are you doing? said, Kevin, the you I know and love was not in that room today. What's on your mind? What's getting in your way? How can I help you?
Mm, hmm.
There's authentic connection because it wasn't about the bad behavior. I wanted to understand what was the trigger, what was the catalyst. Now, Kevin had had a bad morning, got up late, kicked his foot on the bed, spilled coffee in the car, got flicked off on the way to work. There was nothing significant. It was just, bleh. But it was a great example. So, we had a chat, had a hug. Kevin went back inside. He went to see a couple of people at the meeting. And said, "Look, I'm sorry about that." They said, "We know, Kevin. Are you okay? Is everything okay?" Next morning, I noticed people going to Kevin and saying, "Kevin, is everything okay today?" That's authentic leadership. That's authentic care in an organization because we are showing that there's something happening there that we need to know about to be able to help the person.
Yeah, the personal side tends to get excluded in business settings. Where do you like how can we help leaders listening to this not necessarily draw a line, but start to think about bringing the personal side and the human connection side into their culture a little bit more?
Well, personal side doesn't mean you have to get into people's personal life, but personally you can care about them. That's really what it comes down to is, a sales guy's missing his sales target. The leader runs in and says, what's going on? You're losing your sales target, right? Or he could walk in and say, you know, that I noticed you missed your sales target and it's not normal. Is there something going on that you need my help with? There's just a subtle difference between being the aggressor and being the carer.
It's an interesting point you bring up, and there's a difference between speaking to someone or speaking with somebody. And I guess what we teach here in our forums is to turn your U's into I's. That's how we lead other leaders. So I'm not going to say, Gary, you need to make more calls. I'm going to say, Gary, in my experience, I had to make 10 times more calls when my numbers were down that weekend. And so that way, I'm working with you versus speaking to you and going down. Talk a little bit about power dynamics with coaches and employees. Did you ever talk about that a little bit, or did you address kind of the power dynamic in the room? Do you lead differently with subordinates versus other leaders in the organization? Just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might challenge you around the I thing. I think the word is we, not I.
Mm-hmm.
We are in this together.
Mm-hmm.
Not, this is what I did, but we can make that work. The power dynamic is that one about, in a room, if you are the leader and you speak first, then anything else that's said in that room will mean nothing because now you've set the tone. So shut up. Learn to, bring out the best of others. Not, we don't want to know your point of view. I remember early in my career at WD-40, I just moved to the US, and I talk about this in the book as well. And I was in a meeting in our offices in San Diego. This could have been a career limiting move because the then CEO was in the room. I wasn't CEO, I was head of international operations at the time. And there was a person in the room presenting to us. And they were doing something that I've labeled. They were camouflaging the issue with confusion to make out how smart they were. It was a consultant. And I'm sitting there and this person's blabbing on. And I'm thinking to myself, I have no clue what you're talking about. I am completely lost. Everyone in the room sitting there sort of nodding their heads and whatever. So, we're about 15 minutes in and my impatience came out. I put up my hand and I said, not long in this country, but I have no clue what you're talking about. You know what happened, Kevin? Everybody in the room went,
Right.
because no one else knew either. And
Right.
I think that's something else that, I think we have to be brave enough. The three most powerful words I've ever learnt in my life, I don't know. And I got comfortable with them. I used to often introduce myself as, G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, chairman and CEO of WD-40 company, and I need all the help I can get. And it's amazing if you set that tone, that power dynamic goes away because
Mm-hmm.
now you're asking people to be a contributor.
It's so important, and I think about that quote a lot that you shared from years ago on the show. I don't know because oftentimes when you're the leader of the organization, you feel like you have to know. You feel like there's a lot of pressure to have the best decision in the room, and it's so freeing when you can step into those meetings and say that. But you know what's also really cool about that I noticed is after I started saying I don't know, I need help. What's the thing I followed with? Then people were like jumping in, trying to help, taking initiative, showing that they can demonstrate, a competency and take initiative of things. And it felt really empowering. And so I was looking around like Gary's on to something here. This is pretty freeing, but maybe that's another thing too. Just like thinking about empowering the people in your organization. I mean, it seems like you've got a great mindset. You've got incredible values that people are now buying into in the organization. Tell me a little bit about ownership, delegation. How did you get people to really own their responsibilities in WD-40?
By giving them freedom.
Mm,
That's what the values are for. One of the reasons that, I wanted, we had a company that the sun would never set on. Sometime every day around the world, people wanting, we're going to make a decision. So we were very clear on what we wanted to achieve, but I didn't want people quacking up the hierarchy to be able to get it, to make a decision. So we used to say, you can make any decision you want to make in the company as long as you use our values to make that decision, and you will be empowered to do it. I'll give you another probably wrong and roughly right example of that. Kevin's working in the supply chain at WD-40. Someone comes along to him and says, Kevin, I'm going to make you a hero today. And in fact, after this conversation, you're going to be up in the CEO's office. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't get a promotion. You're a public company, right? Profit matters to you. Now, we've done some analysis, and there's an ingredient that you use. We can substitute that ingredient for you. Our efficacy is equal to what you're using. And we believe you can just drop $4 million to the bottom line, Kevin. Are you excited about that? $4 million. You're going to be applauded and rewarded, man. You're going to be a hero. And Kevin said, I'm really excited about it. Tell me more. Is there anything else I should know? Give me the results of the testing and whatever. They go through that. And he said, and then the guy says, just one more thing, Kevin. And don't worry about it. Just have to put a little message on your can. It says, in the state of California, there's ingredients in this known to cause cancer. It's called a Prop 65 warning. But don't worry about it. Everybody does it, right? You're good. Kevin said, oh, damn it. I'm sorry I can't take your product. Why? Well, I'm empowered to make any decision I need to make in the company, and I do that by, using our values. And our first value is we value doing the right thing. Our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Our sixth value is actually we value sustaining the WD-40 economy, which is about profitability. I'm sorry, but cancer does not create any positive, lasting memories. I
right.
can't. Kevin, it's $4 million. You silly, don't you understand this? I do. He said, look, you're obviously not getting it. I need to talk to, someone higher up in the organization. Kevin says, you can talk to anybody you want. You can go talk to the CEO if you want. I know you are going to get exactly the same answer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Kevin goes up to the CEO's office later and said, hey, I just didn't save us $4 million. How come? I made a decision based on our values. Kevin, I'm going to reward and applaud you for that because that's the way we run our organization. Kevin is so empowered. He can make that decision. He doesn't have to worry because they're based on the values of the company.
We'll talk about reducing friction and increasing speed and velocity in your company. I mean, having values is so powerful to scaling your organization. And I really like want to drive this message home, especially for, I mean, obviously it's relevant to all businesses, stages and size, but really for those early stage growth companies, like growing really fast, and they haven't really thought through or implemented a value system into their organization. Though for those kind of businesses, Gary, in another way, could you convey to them the power,
Yeah,
of the value system?
I'll give you an exact example. For 16 years, I was an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego. I taught in the Masters of Science in Executive Leadership program, the one that I actually taught. And I used to teach a class on on culture. And part of the culture class was talking about values. So I wrote this case study that had lots of twists and turns in it. And we talked about we talked about values and the power of them. And I used to divide the class into three. And I'd say, okay, you've got half an hour to come back and give your recommendations on this case study. Group one, you have a hierarchical set of clearly defined values. Here they are. Group two, you have a set of values clearly defined but not hierarchical. Group three, you can do whatever you want. Group three applauded. They were excited, running out of the room thinking they've got all the freedom they want. The first group to come back was the group with the hierarchical set of values because they had a framework to make that decision. The second group back were the group that had values, but they weren't hierarchical. They didn't have a clear answer to the case study that they were confident about because they were spending a lot of time kind of really deciding which value was more important. Every time I had to go out and get the last group, and they were arguing, they were creating, distrust between themselves because they spent most of their time defending what they thought was important and arguing with each other who didn't agree with each other. So the thing that's so clear is if you have this hierarchical set of values, you reduce churn in your organization. So the friction goes away because people actually make decisions and do stuff. And it builds trust and all the rest. So proved it
Great.
many times.
Great example. Great example. And just out of curiosity, Gary, you worked with so many leaders. You're coaching a lot of CEOs right now. Like, are there common traits that these leaders have, such as could be open-mindedness, right? Continuous learners like yourself. What have you noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. The first part of my coaching program is called awareness. Uh, One of the things that's become clear to me, and I think I'm coaching 8 CEOs right now, is most leaders are not aware of how their behavior is impacting those they lead. So we go through a process, and I actually use Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. There are 20 bad habits in that that Marshall has identified over his 40 years of coaching. And I asked the person I'm coaching to tell me where do they think they could turn up the volume. I then go out and I do stakeholder interviews and I interview their stakeholders. And I do a heat map and I say, this is who you think you are as a leader. This is actually who you are as a leader because this is your stakeholders. So I think one of the big things to do is to hold up a mirror. Now, I talked about those attributes of Alec, the soul-sucking CEO. I'm going to tell you, Kevin, I had a lot of them in a great deal of abundance way back in my leadership journey until I realized how useless they were and made a decision to intentionally change that behavior. And I learned that when I went back to school and whatever. So, you leaders out there, you're getting up every day and you're wanting to do the right thing, but you don't know how your behavior is impacting others.
It's an interesting point about change and changing people. Do you think people can change? And if
Absolutely.
so, how do you do that?
With intention.
Mm.
I have a little notebook here, right? I don't know if I've ever shown you this before,
Mm-mm.
but on this notebook, I have a little placard there. And I carry this notebook, and this is version whatever of the notebook, right? And it says, am I being the person I want to be right now? So that's the question I'm asking myself. And the reason I want to ask that question is I have no right to take my leftovers to somebody else. You can be in a meeting or in some sort of environment, and you actually leave some of yourself in there. So I said, am I being the person I want to be right now? And then I asked myself, who is that person? And I have a list. And it says, I want to be grateful, caring, empathetic, reasonable. I want to be a listener. I want to be fact based. I want to have a balanced opinion. I want to be curious. I want to be a learner. And I want to throw sunshine, not a shadow. Now, I've been carrying this thing around for 20 years. Why would you think a guy that was leading $1 billion company needs a stupid sticky note on his notepad? Because we need to remind ourselves of who we want to be, because the world will try and make us something else.
Powerful. Hey, you want to make an impact? Start with intention. That's what I
Yeah,
tell people.
absolutely.
That's great. Well, Gary, just so many nuggets of leadership here. I'm just gonna kind of maybe for anyone listening, we're getting to the end of this episode. Like, what did we talk about today? Talked about trying to get to the heart of the organization, not just the head. Talked about authentic connection and its correlation with happiness and how to create that in an organization, putting a people first mindset, creating psychological safety and love and belonging based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talked about what you've done at WD-40, what you've implemented, and multiple different experiences to help this listener today in the car be a better leader, and starting with intention. In all of this, Garry Ridge, what is your definition of a real leader?
It's not about you. It's about the people you have the privilege to lead.
Well said. Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the program today. Now, we didn't talk about your DJ history. What kind of music are we listening to today?
Yeah. Well, that was way back. Was a lot of fun. But yeah, I was a DJ in Australia many years ago. So um, I had a little Chris Botti on the background here a little while ago.
Okay. What kind of music do you like? Any concerts you attended here in San Diego?
Oh, Elton John, the Doobie Brothers, the Eagles.
Oh,
Yeah, all of that stuff.
all right. Well, we're still a music guy at heart. Then I take
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Good. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us here on the Real Leaders Podcast today, keeping it real. I really think and I really hope this is going to impact a lot of business leaders out there who can just, show up as if they want to care a little bit more here today. I think that story with you, looking around the trash can, looking around the bushes for that person is so powerful, so impactful. And if it could just impact one person, then we're doing our job here today. For Garry Ridge, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there and always keep it real. Gary, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin.